Okay. Okay, then welcome everybody to the Finance and Resources Committee, 21st of March 2025 for the Fire Authority. So item 1 is apologies for absence. We've got 2, Catherine.
We have chair from Councillor Tom Smith and Councillor Callum Bailey.
Thank you. No further apologies offered. Declarations of interest at item 2.
No.
None declared. And then we have the minutes on page 3, the minutes for the last meeting, which are on 3 to 10. So I'll move those. Seconder. Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody got any items? Anything I need to raise? No?
No, I think we're happy.
Okay then. Thanks everyone. Right, item 4 will be, are you going to do this, Bev?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. So this is the revenue and capital monitoring based on actuals up to January 2025 and then obviously a forecast for the end of the year to position at the 31st of March 2025. So in 2.1 on page 12 of the agenda pack, it outlines the current forecast position. So it shows that we're expecting to be £1.9 million underspent by the end of the year, which represents 2.82% of the budget. So compared to the last monitoring that came through to committee, we were focusing at that point 1.24 million underspend. So the underspend has increased by £245,000 since last monitoring. The report also goes on, and I'll cover it in more detail later, to say that we are utilising some of the underspend for 200k is being allocated for further work on CFMIS system. And that was discussed and agreed with group leaders in between the time of these two, the last meeting and this meeting. And then under sort of my delegated authority, there's also a 25k being allocated for an intern post. So both those things are being funded from the underspend in 24-25, but they'll actually happen in next year. So in relation to the current underspend, obviously we'd budgeted to use 138k as well of general fund reserves when we set the budget, and we won't need to do that. So then that reduces that level of underspend down to £1.35 million. Also, just in relation to the underspend, so in 2.2, it points out within this year we're actually committing 60k of the underspend for breathing apparatus to replace damaged sets. So again, that was something that was agreed with group leaders due to the urgency of needing to do it. And then as part of this report, we're asking for approval to use 135k to support breathing apparatus washers as well. That'll be, if that gets approved, that'll be in the capital programme for 25-26 next year, but funded from the underspend. In terms of the reasons for the underspend, so the majority of it is, as we've reported before and been through in previous reports and in previous meetings. In terms of the whole time pay, obviously that's one of the big areas of spend. And the reason it has increased since last time in relation to the whole time pay underspend, it has increased slightly, and where it's increased is that level of overspend on the overtime has come down since last time, so that's then created that greater overall underspend. It's gone up a little bit, and that's just based on the activity and the actual level of the overtime spend today that's then projected for the rest of the year. In terms of on-call pay, so again, it's pretty the same position as where we were last time, where it has slightly increased the level of underspend, and it's in relation to the turnouts and disturbance allowances where that increase has happened in terms of the underspend. And again, it's based on activity for the year, and then just forecasting that for the rest of the year. So that has created a little bit more of an underspend there. Non-uniform pay, so that is the overspend on that slightly reduced since last time. So the reasons for that is, which we've discussed before, is that we've had the pay award came in at less than what we budgeted for, that created a saving. That's been offset by some ICT temporary resources that have been built in, and we've obviously got the vacancy factor, which has been underachieved, but it's slightly increased since last time, which is then why that overspend's come down since last time we reported. In terms of pensions and employee other costs, that they're pretty same as what we've outlined before. On premises costs, again, that underspend has come down slightly since last time, and that's due to the overspend on reactive buildings and repairs is slightly higher than was reported last time, being forecast last time, and water rates are slightly higher, overspend on them as well since last time. But some of that overspend on water rates is due to putting meters within the stations, so hopefully that then will give us more information and data about our usage to help us control that going forward. In relation to transport related costs, again, the area where that's moved slightly is the underspend's increased in relation to fuel. So we were previously reporting that underspend is 200k, that's now gone up to 250k forecast underspend on fuel. In relation to supplies and services, third party payments, there's not been much movement in relation to that. The next area where we've got a little bit of movement is other income, so at 2.16. So previously we were reporting that as 350 overachieved income. It's now gone up to 427k overachieved income, and that is in relation to the interest receivable and just the balances that we're holding and the interest rates that we're receiving. So we're now forecasting at a higher level. And that is where and this is like a technical adjustment, but where we're funding that 25k in-term post from, it will be taken from that budget. So that's reflected in the comments in that 2.16. Capital financing, again, so the overall position, 306k underspend, has reduced since we previously reported it, but the reason it's reduced again is because of that technical adjustment. That'll be where we take that 200k from in relation to the CFMIS, allocating it to the CFMIS or to a reserve so we can draw it down in next year for the CFMIS project. And just for information, the CFMIS is where it's a system where we've got our primary data storage and management information in it, and we need to do some more work around that in relation to the information that it holds around our premises and the risks around the premises. And as I've mentioned before, that was agreed with group leaders in a meeting in February. In terms of the efficiency savings at 2.18, so again, there's no movement on that since we previously reported. So we'd obviously identified areas where we were planning to make efficiencies in year. Against that, we'd achieved 129 against 219, but then we'd identified further savings as well, where we've not achieved those ones we'd set out at the beginning of the year. So overall, we have achieved 230k against the 219 target we'd got. And those ones that haven't been achieved in this year fully will then move forward and get achieved in 25-26. 2.21 outlines the reserves position. So it outlines the net position that's reported at the beginning of the report, in terms of that we're expecting use of reserves of 581 and transfers to reserve of 512, which then gives you that net movement of the 69k. And obviously comparing to our general fund balance, minimum balance of 4.1, we're projecting that the general fund balance will be 5 million, so we're within that tolerance. In terms of capital programme, so table 4 outlines the movements in the overall capital programme. So we've reflected obviously the changes that were agreed and reported in the November report to committee, and that takes the overall capital programme down to 7.4 million. And then we've got some adjustments that have gone through as part of this monitoring. So we've got an audit adjustment that we've had to make that's increased the programme by 261. We've got some vehicle charging points that have been added in, but they've been funded by a grant. And then we've got the breathing apparatus that I mentioned earlier, that's been added to the programme, funded from the underspend, funded from revenue underspend. So table 5 then summarises the position in terms of that revised programme of 7.8 million and projects that we're forecasting a 5.4 spend against that, and the variance then of that 2.3 is broken down into slippage of 1.7 and underspend of £690,000. In relation to where we've got slippage this time being reported, it's on the fire appliances. So obviously their stage payments are being made for those, and we're expecting 4 to come in by the end of the year, but then the remainder will follow in 25-26, so some of that spend's slipping into 25-26. There's also been some small slippage on aerial ladder platforms and light vehicles. In relation to estates, the slippage is mainly on the Service Development Centre Phase 2 work, and that's projects currently being reviewed and looking at the requirements needed and the financial viability of that project. So the programme of that work will slip into 25-26 when that work's been done. Big areas again in ICT, or the largest area of slippage is on the RMS system. So obviously you've received updates as Fire Authority on the RMS system. And the profile of the spend's obviously based on milestone payments, and they're being delayed until 25-26. So that's just the budget's being profiled, and that's being slipped into 25-26. Moving on to prudential code monitoring. Again, there's nothing to report by exception. Everything is within the sort of the indicators and the targets that we've set for the year. 2.3 identifies that the capital financing requirement's been updated, obviously in line to the forecast capital programme and the slippage that's happened, and that does show that our borrowing, our external borrowing, is actually 3.29 million, so it's within and below our CFR and below the operational authorised limits. And in relation to 2.33, talks about our net debt position, so and identifies that that's again within our limits that we set. And 2.3 just talks about the rate return on our investments. So we're achieving 4.66%, and the SONIA rate that we compare with, which is a 3-month average, is 4.9. So we're obviously slightly under that, but we're not holding all of our money at 3 months, some of it's shorter than that, so that's why we're getting less rates than that, and we're restricted obviously as well, because we can only place 4 million with certain counterparties where you're getting that higher level of investment. I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah. Thanks, Bev. Any questions, anyone? Can I just ask on the water thing? I'm thinking I've got a water meter at home, it's brilliant, but I'm thinking here when we're practising and we're squirting out gallons of water, is that not going to cost us more?
The use of the the water does. We try everything possible to minimise the use of the water. Yeah. However, we have to sort of balance that against the operational preparedness that we need to be able to undertake. So we do monitor it and we are careful with it, but at the same time we still. Yeah.
Still a bit. I just thought upgrading that.
Yeah.
We'll probably be paying a lot more out. Omar.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the report, we can see the underspend is quite regular happening now. So looking at the 2.2, with the 1.35 underspend being allocated to the capital funding, how will that impact with the Fire Authority's borrowing strategy and the long-term financial sustainability?
The fact that we're going to use the underspend to fund capital programme, that means that we'll have reduced charges going forward in terms of our capital charges that relate to that capital programme. So where we're funding capital programme, it's funded generally by borrowing, which it is if we've not got a grant or a capital receipt or using revenue, you fund it by borrowing, and then obviously you've got to repay the borrowing and you incur interest on that. So by applying the revenue underspend to it, will reduce that level of borrowing, which means then we'll get some revenue savings in those capital charges in future years.
All right, yeah.
That makes sense.
That's good.
Anybody else?
Yeah,
Richard.
a couple of things. I mean, forecasting spending is a dark art, really, isn't it? In budgets, and there's a lot of variation, and it's very clear as to why. But on the 2.5, where we're talking about the underspend on basic pay, where we had that surprise about the pay award being a little bit lower than was budgeted for, that's fine. But where it says higher number of people on development rates of pay, does this mean we can expect that at some point these people will catch up and then we'll get nearer to the budgeted figure? Is it just a time?
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of years, and then they'll move up and get to that, the full established rate. Yes. Yeah. But we have, in terms of the budget we set for 25-26, we've taken into that account, so we know where people are now, and we know it's like for your Green Book staff, your non-uniformed. It's like giving them an increment, if you like.
Oh,
so
right.
we've built that in now into the budget. So we have tried to reflect, so we won't have such a large underspend next year because we've built that into setting that budget. But then, like you say, we'll review that annually when we set that budget, and people will then move up, and eventually they would get to that top rate.
Right.
But then you'll also have people that leave and people that come in at the bottom and go on to development rate again. So it's one of those things that we'll review annually as we set the budgets.
Okay. And then also looking at 2.10, isn't it really unusual to read about energy prices being lower than expected, or decreased significantly, which I mean, is that unique to us then, or is it just the general? Have we got some sort of special? Perhaps I should know this, but I can't remember. How does it work? Because everyone else's energy prices have gone up considerably.
Yeah, if you think, because obviously we set our budget based on when we were at a real high increases in energy, so we were over prudent really in setting our budgets and thinking they were going to stay at that level and increase at that level going forward. So that's why we've got an underspend. And again, we have now built that. We rebased the energy budgets in 25-26 when we've set the budgets again. So we've rebased it on where we are now and then putting in a forecast of what we think the increase will be. So we've sort of again that should balance. Yeah, we shouldn't have our underspends next year. It should be closer to the forecast. The forecast and the budget should be more aligned.
That's good because I guess at the end and as I said earlier, you can never be accurate with these things. I mean, because there's always going to be variations, but you never know. We might get people wondering, oh well, you had to put your precept up, and is it really was it really necessary? And so we need to be ever so clear as to be able to explain to whoever might ask those questions as to why. Oh well, on the one hand you've underspent a lot, but on the other hand you're putting your
So where we've had these bigger underspends in this year, we've I went through and sort of scrutinised this and identified those areas of underspend, and we've took them all into account in setting the budget for 25-26. So that we don't have an underspend next year, or a significant underspend next year.
Might be certain other groups that jump on that.
Yeah, well, you might say that. I wouldn't disagree.
I suppose really just to support what Beth's been saying there. One of the challenges that we've been living with as a fire authority for a number of years now is a year-on-year single year settlement. And that drives some of the behaviours around where we are, because in terms of, I would say, energy costs, we have as we set the budget, we are basing upon that financial term, aren't we? Yeah. And then as a consequence, I would guess, I don't know for accuracy, but I would guess that in terms of the budget that's related to energy costs, it's probably returned back down to where it was in terms of the hike that we all experienced because of the national challenges, the global challenges with regards to fuel. And it's the same with the staffing, trying to align the staffing resources on a year-on-year basis, and having a budget that's contained on that we're planning for is really, really challenging. And you'll see from the report, we are planning to recruit and bring people in September, but the recruitment from the start to finish it's a considerable amount of time. It takes a good number of months to get a firefighter into the organisation, fully trained as part of the organisation, then onto the development programmes, then supporting the operational delivery of activities. So we're hopeful this year, as part of the spending review, we are seeking that, and we ask members to continue to support that we are seeking a multi-year settlement, and that will enable us to be able to forecast and plan and hopefully avoid some of these peaks and troughs. I suppose lastly that whilst I do very much take on board the comments made in terms of the future assumption planning, we need to recognise that through the assumptions that have been put forward, we're still aiming towards a deficit of years 26 and 27. So we've got all that in the back of mind when we're trying to plan the most financial viable way forward.
And we might need the underspend if Rachel from accounts gets going at it next week. We might suddenly have to dip in there.
Yes.
you never know, do you? But,
Well,
sorry.
no, you're right. That's absolutely
I don't know
right.
what's coming.
I mean, and what with the national insurance issues? as
Yeah,
well,
we've got that.
all that. We've got that to worry about, haven't we?
Yeah. So,
Yes.
So I think a lot of fire
Well,
authorities like to be in this position financially, and a lot of other authorities. So is there no more questions?
No.
I'll read these out because people won't be able to see this. So the recommendation is that we scrutinise the contents of the report, approve the allocation of 135,000 for the revenue underspending for breeding apparatus washers to be purchased in 2025-26. Approve the slippage and acceleration in the capital programme from 25-26 as detailed in this report, and also to approve the forecast capital programme over underspends as set out in section 2.27. I'll move that from the chair. Can we second? We agreed? We are agreed, thank you. Move over to external audit.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you for.
You're Richard, are you?
Yeah, I'm Rich today. My real name is Nicole, but I'm Rich today. He's doing a CSR day today, so he's packing some baked beans for food bank. So, yes, that's what he's doing today.
Welcome.
I'm going to give a short verbal update. We have started our audit planning, and our team have worked with Bev and Tom and the finance team closely to progress further with planning. We plan to bring an external audit plan in next committee. I think last year we have some issues with valuations. We disclaimed in our audit report, but this year we have been trying to work with Tom. I know you got a new valuer, so we were trying to agree a date to look through valuation as early as possible so we can clear that this year. I know may have some questions on the opinions. At this stage, I don't think we have to receive all of the guidance about how the opinions will be look like this year. But what we can say is I think this year will be a better opinion compared to last year. But whether it's qualified or modified, we have to wait for central guidance being released. Mm-hmm. Happy to take any questions?
Very quick update. That's okay.
No? Beth, any comments?
No, obviously, just so you know, the 23-24 got finalised and signed off by the deadline, the backstop date, the 28th of February. So we've hit that deadline and they've been signed off and published. And there was no changes to the report. Obviously, the draft report came to last committee from KPMG. There was no changes in relation to that report. So that all got, like I say, went through and we hit that deadline of 28th of February. In terms of, you touched on the valuers, didn't you?
Yeah.
In my next report, I'll talk about the valuers and the process with the valuers and pick that up because it's in there anyway.
So we're quite happy if we move and second this and then...
Yeah.
Okay, agreed? Mm-hmm. Agreed, thank you. Moving over to the next bit.
Thank you. So this report is about presenting you with the accounting policies that will then prepare the accounts based on those policies for the accounts for 24-25, and it also talks about those areas where again, when KPMG come and present their reports, they talk about the areas of significant risk, which are pensions and the valuations, because they're obviously quite large figures within the balance sheets. So that they're the areas of risk. So it talks about the estimation techniques that are used in relation to those. So in terms of the accounting policies, so obviously you're used to seeing the accounting policies when we bring the statement of accounts through for approval. So this is really giving you oversight of them so that you know what we're going to use in actually producing the accounts and giving you that assurance and scrutiny of those before we go ahead and use them. So there's no major changes in terms of the accounting policies. We always review them. So at 2.2, we always review them in line with the Code of Practice for Local Government Accounting for this year, for 24-25. And that did introduce the adoption of the IFRS 16 leases. So you might have heard a reference to that for the last few years because it's been delayed. The implementation of that's been delayed, but we now have got to implement it in this year. And there's a couple of other accounting standards that have been updated, but none of those are having sort of material impact on our statement, accounting policies or our statements of accounts. Even in terms of the leases, we've had to review our position in relation to it, but it's not an area where we've got, we don't have many leases, so it's not having a material impact on us. But we have taken that into account we will be doing as we prepare the accounts for 24-25. The full accounting policies are enclosed as Appendix A, so we've reviewed them, and actually, with me being new in position and Tom, sort of my deputy, being in position, we've gone through, and what we've tried to do is take out things that aren't relevant to us, because actually you refer to the code of practice, but there's things in there that don't actually apply to us. So you will see that we've removed some things that have been in perhaps previously and don't really need to be. So that we have taken those out, and we'll keep that under review. Obviously next year we'll do the same thing, so if there's something that then became relevant to us, we'd add it back in anyway. And if something happens as we go through and prepare the accounts and we think, well, we should have left that in, we'll obviously leave that in and flag that when we bring the accounts back to you. I think the other thing with the accounting policies, I think some of the things that were in there were probably more suitable to go into the notes to the accounts as well. So when we're going through and doing the accounts this year, we'll move those things to the notes to the accounts if they are relevant, rather than being the actual policies. 2.5 then talks about that uncertainty in relation to where we do estimations, and as I've said, that's mainly around valuations and the PPE valuations and the pensions liability valuations and estimates. And as Nicole pointed out in 2.8, we talk about our valuers. So we have appointed new valuers because, as Nicole said last year, the valuers that we used delayed a little bit in getting us the information, which then obviously has a knock-on effect on us being able to produce the accounts. And KPMG struggled to get some information, didn't you, responses to them in terms of queries they were raising with them as well. So we have appointed new auditors, and as a result of that, because we've appointed new auditors, what it means is that they're doing a full valuation of all the fire stations, all the properties. So we'll be in a stronger position really, that they're doing a full valuation rather than doing desktop valuations. So it makes those figures more reliable. So that will put us in a stronger position anyway. And like I said, my deputy's been out with the valuers already. They've been out and visited all the stations. So that valuation work is well underway, and we'll be getting the full valuations back in April. That will put us in a good position then to use that information to produce the accounts by the deadline. The section 2.11 then talks about the pensions liability and how that calculation gets pulled together. So we use an actuary obviously to do that valuation, because it's a complex and technical piece of work, and they're the pension actuaries are the experts in doing that. There is the appendix to it outlines the areas where they make judgments and assumptions, and it talks about the methodology and what that they use, and the indices and things that they refer to in making their assumptions around the figures that then form the pension liabilities note. And they provided that information in terms of a position at January, and then they obviously, the methodology won't change that they'll follow, but the indices that they use obviously will be the updated indices as at the 31st of March position, and we'll get a revised report that we then use to produce the accounts, the figures that go in the accounts in relation to pensions. I suppose what's key also in terms of valuations and the pensions valuation is that it affects the balance sheet figures. It don't actually affect like our cash position or our revenue position. Obviously, like going forward, if you sell an asset, then you'd materialise your value of your properties. And in terms of the pension liability, when they do their triannual review and they look at the employer rates, that's when that impacts on in terms of your cash and revenue position of the authority. But I'm happy. I know it was quite a technical report, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions?
That's pretty standard.
No, it's,
You know, when you look at the buildings, do the environmental side of it, see whether, how, on the rating, you know, do your rating on, I forget the name of it.
Yeah, I know what you mean,
Yeah.
energy efficiency rating.
Yeah,
I
do
don't
we, get,
think
do we get a bonus on it if it's in good nick? Or?
they've taken into account the sort of the state of the building. That'll obviously impact on the valuation. But don't know if they go down to look at the efficiency rating. I don't
know whether it would affect
I don't
it.
think it'd be part of this sort of type of
Because I know
valuation.
it can affect a house sale.
Yeah.
If it's not got A, B, C or whatever it is. No.
No, I'm not aware that they do that.
And as for pensions, I sit on pensions at County Hall. Richard does sometimes, don't you, Richard?
I do sometimes.
It is a minefield
Yes.
of how they ever begin to understand all of it. But I do understand we've got about 6 billion in the bank at the moment,
Yeah.
haven't we? Something like that.
Yeah.
So it's quite healthy, but it has had a few shocks this year with obvious, global things that are going on. But,
Well, there is talk, isn't there, of all the local government pension funds being taken into a central pot. Would that affect us?
It
Do we
would,
know?
because it's about the LGPS scheme. So
Of course, yes, so it is all
would
part of that, isn't
yeah.
it? Yeah.
We've obviously got the fact that this report's talking about the LGPS scheme, but we've obviously got the firefighter scheme as well, which sits separately.
Right.
And so that wouldn't be part of that.
Still affect.
That's had to be wary to that one. Another one for Richard for Rachel in accounts. Because we're going to form this part, and I don't understand. I mean, use of it because it's sort of standing there this morning, but if you took a big chunk of it, it'd have a big effect.
Yeah, I think that's the sort of rationale behind it, isn't
Yeah.
it? If they pulled it all together, you could get better investment returns,
Yeah.
I think, by pulling it all together.
It's a big worry if it all went back.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's the
Or
controls, isn't it,
bailing out
over it.
Rachel.
Oh, bailing out Rachel, yeah, I know, that's what I'm thinking. All right, don't tell her.
I won't quote you on that. No.
Okay, then we'll move to recommendations, which are, I've got to make a page number out here, 29. Approve the accounting policies, approve the assumptions to be used in actual evaluation of the pensions, and note the risk associated with the estimation. Uncertainty within the financial statements in relation to property and actual pension valuations, how they are mitigated. I'll move them. If I've got a second there, we've got a second, we're all agreed. We're all agreed. Moving on to procurement.
Yeah, so this report gives an update in relation to procurement activities for 24-25. So within the terms of reference of Finance and Resources Committee, it does state that the committee should be and should approve the tender awards that are being progressed that are over. It talks about the EU limits actually, but obviously that since Brexit they've now become the World Trade Organisation and government procurement agreement thresholds, so that the UK thresholds. And within financial procedures it also says that the committee members should be aware and approve all the single source supplier contracts that have been awarded within the year. They should get an annual report on that position. So that's the purpose of the report. So in 1.1 it just does highlight what those limits are in relation to contract awards. So for a supplies and services contract it's just under £215,000. Obviously for major works contracts it's just under £5.5 million in relation to that. So 2.1 just identifies the current contracts that we're looking at that are sort of over those thresholds at the moment and identifies the route to procurement that we're proposing to take. So there's one in relation to our bulk fuel buy. So it's expected, so that's where we're buying obviously the fuel that gets delivered to fire stations to be used by the appliances. The value of the contract is expected to be £400,000 and the proposal will be that we'll use the ESPO framework and it would be a 4-year contract, and the rates that are available within that framework are currently being compared to get the contractor that gives us best value in terms of that. There's also a contract for tyres, so that's replacement tyres for all the vehicles, which includes appliances and light fleet. And again, that annual spend is 800k per annum, but we're looking at a 4-year contract, and again, it's the ESPO framework that's being looked at in relation to that. And then there's also the stock held Stock Hill Build project manager, so the project manager that will manage that scheme for us. And the estimated cost of that is estimated to be £200,000. And again, we're looking at using a framework through that, but because it's more specification needed in terms of the work that's required, it'll be through a mini competition, a mini tender process. So they're the sort of routes to procurement routes that we're proposing to undertake. Just in terms of obviously by using frameworks, the suppliers have obviously been through a tendering process to get put on those frameworks. So the reason, you can demonstrate that you're getting best value because they've been through that tendering process. But by using them, it obviously saves times because you've not got to go out to do the tender yourself, and it uses standard terms and conditions and pre-agreed terms and conditions, so it saves times on the resource and the legal protections. And we're proposing to enter into 4-year contracts as a reasonable time frame again, because obviously it allows us to test the market again in 4 years' time, so it doesn't overcommit us, and that allows us to make sure and demonstrate we can achieve best value. But obviously it's long enough to be a reasonable time to not keep incurring those costs in relation to procurement awarding. In relation to single source suppliers, so they're identified in the table in relation to the ones that have been undertaken between April and March. So this is where people have asked for a waiver against complying with the procedures in relation to contracts, because there's only one supplier that's identified because of various reasons, and the reasons are identified in the table. So it could be that it's an urgent need to renew the contract. It could be because of the cost of switching the contract, or it could be because there's only one supplier available, or it could be because they've got specialist knowledge or local knowledge in relation to the contracts. So they're all identified in that table. Where single source suppliers have been requested because it's urgent, areas have then been informed that for next time they do a contract renewal, they do need to build that into the time frame and go out and do an evaluation and test the market. But obviously, at the point that they're bringing it forward, we can't be without contracts, so we are having to do it on the annual basis, renew it on an urgent basis, but on the proviso that they do that going forward. And in relation to, there were 2 areas of non-compliance that were picked up where they didn't come through the procurement team, and they've issued the contracts, but again we've worked with those areas and they've had training, so they know the process that they should be going through. And obviously this is building on the contract management audit reports that have come through here and the procurement audits that have come through here. So the recommendation is, in relation to the contract awards, is to give myself delegated authority to accept and decide on the actual final contract that they would go with in relation to the frameworks. But that, if the committee wants, they could ask for it to be in accordance with the chair if you wanted to.
So should it go through a member just to...
Yeah, it can be in accordance with the chair. So that's...
Okay, thank you.
Are we talking about the report in general?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, on your list of the single source suppliers, it makes interesting reading. I wonder whether it might be helpful in the future to perhaps have a little bit more detail in the reason, because on some of these it's fairly obvious, like for example fire helmet servicing, you've had to go to a specialist provider. But when you read something like, for example, crash recovery, and it just says urgency, is that a crash of a computer system or what? It just maybe it might be just out of interest more than anything else, because again, if third parties are reading this, and you know how cynical some people out there are of public services, and they read things like this, they might come to us one day and say, well, what have they spent that amount of money on? And again, this is going to sound really cheeky, and I don't want it to, but it's a genuine question. If someone said to me, what was the Wild Pheasant Hotel and Spa, I might struggle to explain that. Now, I'm sure it's all very sort of needed, but you can understand where I'm coming from.
Yeah, we can add some more information in. Yeah, definitely.
So and out of interest, what's that?
It's in relation to where they do, I think it's water training. It's definitely
I don't
training.
know, to be honest.
It's where they have to go to do a training course, and it's a hotel that's in the locality of the training.
Right. So you can see where I'm coming from. So if someone read that, they would think, oh, is someone on a jolly? And I'm not certain what that. I know that's not the case, but again, you can see.
I mean, all that information does come through, and I do see that and sign it off. I can add, make sure we add some more information about the context.
I know it adds to your work putting a report together, but maybe just another little column or just notes, even after the table, just sort of notes this was for that and so on. Just
that's fine. Yeah.
Sounds very nice, doesn't it?
Just out of curiosity, just quick one. The stock bill project. The procurement approach involves a mini competition, as you can see on that, via the framework. How do you ensure the transparency and accountability in that, and the selection process, given the estimated contract value 200k?
In terms of the mini competition, we keep all the evidence of that mini competition. So where it's mini competition, it's through the framework.
Yeah.
So it is, but we go to them basically and give them a spec. But rather than it being an open tender where anybody can bid for it, it's people that are already on the framework that then go through, bid for it and give us that information. And we'd keep all that as we do for any tender process. We'd have all that we'd keep all that for our records.
No, that's fair. Yeah.
Back on your list. I was just wondering, what's the structural access for Links Fire and Rescue Service?
Well, that one I do know. I don't know about even though I suspect, but I will check the accuracy about the Wild Pheasant Hotel. The structural access is training, actually, which is received by the firefighters who are based here at Highcross Fire Station. And it's to support if there's an operational need when we have a difficulty in terms of access to challenging environments. It's creating a safe environment, and Lincolnshire are a well-renowned provider of that and have some special facilities that we go and use. But there wouldn't be many in terms of single support. There wouldn't be many that have that quality of level of facilities that we need to be able to use for that realistic training.
Great, thank you. More? No? Happy with the recommendation? Agreed? Thank you. Next one, corporate. Chris?
Chair. Thank you, Chair. Members will be aware that this report is presented on a 6-monthly basis, and it's pleasing to report that we assess the current assessment of risk to be stable. What members will note is that this report is slightly different to previous reports that we've presented. To improve our approach to corporate risk management and to improve the level of transparency and also the flexibility of the process that sits behind the evaluation of risk, we've made some changes, and we've changed some, and we've worked across industry and taken on board some sector best practice, and we've aligned and adopted our risk management processes with the National Fire Chiefs Council. So we've adopted their emergency preparedness and resilience risk register. In doing that, we've also taken into consideration some of the fire standards that really detail what best practice is, and we've also looked at the ISO standard for risk management. Detailed in 2.5 is the 10 areas that we've identified that sits as generic risks across fire sectors. And then what we do, we look at these and we break them down into various different subheadings and calculate and assess that level of risk based upon those 10 critical areas. One of the other changes that we've undertaken is that we're moving away from almost a hard copy. We've adopted a digital format for the new risk register. And one of the reasons that we've done that is because we're putting a lot more emphasis on departmental risk registers and how that will feed the corporate risk register. But members will also know in 2.8 we've developed our own system, and we believe we've saved about £15,000 as a result of that development. I think it's reasonable to say that we're on the early stage of the new risk register, and we're rolling out the more of the changes to the departmental risk registers, and that will take place during this next year of 25 and 26. As a consequence of the changes, we will report the highest levels of risk to both the internal governance practices, which is the Community Risk Management Plan Assurance Board, which is chaired by the Chief Officer, and then bring those high levels of risk to yourselves to council via the committee structure. Lower risk will be expect that to be managed by the departmental risk registers, and the area managers will oversee that particular work. In summary, there are 4 areas that we deem as high risk. We have got no very high risk areas. They are on page 64, and they're detailed in the table within there. Members will be very aware about the details in the previous reporting, and as Bev's already reported today, the risk that's associated with the replacement mobilising system. And we've already discussed the firefighter pensions and the complexity, the challenge, the specific knowledge that we need to be able to adapt to the challenges that are being presented regarding the pensions. The inability to set a balanced budget. Again, I don't want to replay some of the discussions that I've already had, but just to stress that we are, whilst we have set a balanced budget for this year, we are still looking forward to, in terms of future forecasting for a deficit. So we still believe that's a significant risk, a high risk. And then one that's it's a little bit more generic, but we do see there is risk, the high risk there, which is a loss of ICT systems through the potential of cyber attacks, and that's something that's sitting at high risk across, I would suggest, all public sector organisations. It's a very quick canter over the report, but I think the really important thing is that we do assess that the risks are very stable. We have the mitigation in place to make sure that they are stable. So I present to members the report.
Thanks, Vic. Comments? Okay.
So just on the going to the digital format.
Yes.
So we're no longer having it as an appendix to the report. So is it easily accessible though? Do we just go on the website, or how does that work?
That's the future ambition, that we have a responsibility to make sure that the risk register in an appropriate format is presented, so it's more visible. We're not quite there, Councillor, in terms of that level of transparency, but that is the aim as we constantly develop that position.
Okay.
It'll be front facing on our external website as a result of that.
So it will be.
Yes. It will.
And do we have sorry if it's venture, but do we have a time scale for that then?
I don't. I can find out.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's similar to AI.
Yes.
I still think that's a risk. I mean, I'm not against it, but I think it's, until we fully understand it.
Well, it's quite scary.
Yes, it's
It is quite
taking
telling a robot this, that, and the other. But is there any, I'm going to see the cyber attack, but is there anything? Have we got a risk? We've got all this uncertainty in the world because we are a rescue service, and now we look at some of our colleagues in Palestine and in the Ukraine at the moment. They must be under tremendous pressure there.
Historically, fire and rescue services have not been high on the risk register in terms of the same level as whether it be other emergency services or the public sectors. However, I think it was about 2 years ago, there was a high-profile attack at Humberside Fire and Rescue Service, and it crippled their system for a number of years. It took significant amounts of resources, including cost, to be able to address that. We do, on a daily basis, have malicious attacks that we obviously protect. We have systems in place and also software in place that protects that. But it is quite startling the number of attacks that we have on a daily basis.
Really?
Yes. We have an internal internal governance process, a protective and security group that I chair, that we report those attacks, and it's not just about reporting the malicious attacks that we have on a daily basis. It's also about how we proactively educate and train. Some of the weaknesses in terms of cyber attacks are generally individuals and the behaviours of individuals, such as ourselves, in terms of how we access information and what we do with information. So we're constantly training individuals and also simulating attacks and exercises as a result of that, in terms of that preparedness. We've just completed a digital maturity assessment, which has identified areas. It's identified a number of strengths, but it's also identified other areas of improvements that we could and should undertake in terms of the cyber attack, and that work is ongoing as a result of that.
So do we need to recommend it, not in this, but to the main committee, at some point we get some update? It can be in the back of the book. Because I know on this thing, do you get it?
Yeah.
I think I'm on 149 hackers this week trying to get into the system, probably after the council budget, after the council budgets and things like that, and wanting to do it, the numbers of accounts, etc. But they're a damn nuisance. But we have to keep really on top of it, don't we? But I think a report to the committee at some time but it'd have to be locked down how we do it.
I think it would be quite useful and almost, and I don't mean this in a patronising way, but quite educational in terms of the activities around the protective security because of the risk. It's I'll bring it on that with and choose appropriate. Bring it. I think this committee is probably the most appropriate one. I'm trying to think now which one it might be.
And again to you, Bev, there's probably be quite a cost to it if we have to put some more precautions in.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
It's not cheap, is it?
Yeah, I mean, and there's a cost obviously for what we've already got in place as well. Anyway, yeah, it is a significant cost.
Gosh, no, I didn't know it was as bad as that. The number of attacks.
Yeah.
So are they typically sort of dodgy emails coming into people then? And
The phishing.
Yeah, lots. Yeah, and we replicate that by doing phishing emails as well. And
good. Yeah, I know the council does that, doesn't it, John? They sometimes send a thing out, and it looks genuine. And if you reply to it, they said this was a test.
Yeah.
Fortunately, that's only happened to me once.
Yes.
I just flash it out.
Usually you can spot them.
Yes.
But yeah, that's a real worry, isn't it?
To be honest, some of the email look like so real.
Yeah, they get
so
him.
real, you just feel like,
Better.
okay, sometimes that's what's in it.
Yes. The investment in the software as such is significant as well in terms of that protection, but it is quite startling the numbers that the software does protect us from, the number of...
Do you have a sort of, we call it, we use it the spam reporting email, so if you or anyone receives an email that is plainly a spoof or a spam, can they forward it on to someone in the authority who can sort of block the IP address it comes from, etc.?
Yes, we have two individuals that sit on the cyber security team.
Right.
We have a cyber security manager that is overseas and can access all those emails because sometimes genuinely some of our emails end up in that area and we need them free from that quarantine. So it does work both ways. I think the challenge for it is we need to be, and we know from the recent challenges that the county had that how important connectivity is. And we need to make sure that we can operate the service and be able to connect and use the information that is, to our best of our ability. But at the same time, we need to be able to protect ourselves against the malicious activities.
You can see in the current market, cyber security job is high demand now.
Yes.
Because it's a constant kind of thing.
The technology changes fast, doesn't it?
That's the additional recommendation, Chair.
Yeah, thanks. Okay. Agreed? Agreed? I think that's about it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll be back, well, I don't know.
Well, who knows?
Just 7,000 people there.